Himiko, Himi Himiko, Himiko Himiko, Himi Himiko, Himiko Himiko, Himi Himiko.
Good day to you, class. Now I know that this is a relief period and all of you want to relax, but I have a very important quote-unquote announcement and lesson to let you guys know. So I've decided to come in during your relief period. Your teacher did not give you any homework, so I thought might as well teach you guys something new. So good day once again. My name is Mr. Argentum, and today I would like to talk about the Genesis spoilers we saw from V-Clan selection. I believe you all already know what are the 3 new cards that I want to talk about. But for those who are not in the know, the 3 cards that I'll be talking about today are the Himiko Reverse, Sunlight Goddess Yatagarasu, and the Apple Cider Witch. So sit back, relax, and listen to what I have to say. If you have any questions during the class, please raise up your hand and ask. Alternatively, you could leave a comment down below and I'll reply to you soon. We'll start off with the old Himiko. So the old Himiko, by paying the cost, we can activate a critical trigger or heal trigger 2 to 3 times, sometimes maybe 4 times in a single turn. Use a critical if you want to push, or you use a draw perfect guard, you return it back to your deck if you want to draw into your pieces. Now, let us look at the new Himiko and see what she does. I've placed the translated effects on the screen here. So when you look at the first effect, you think like, oh, if we manage to proc either old Himiko or Himiko's reverse skill this turn, if we manage to proc it, then we get to superior right her from our hand. I want you all to take a good read at the first and second effect, and you'll realize something really quick is that the first and second effect sort of works together. So what you want to be doing is you want to be calling out your critical or your draw trigger from your soul as a lock card to your rearguard circle. After calling the card out as a lock card, if you are able to use Himiko's superior right effect again, you move that card back into your soul due to the cost for the superior right. So using this method, you could essentially loop a critical trigger or loop a draw perfect guard or something like that. You can loop it across a few turns. Because if you remember, you unlock a card first, then only you resolve this end of turn from hand effect. So basically you unlock the trigger that you call out, and then you activate the effect from hand, superior right, and move all your rearguards to your soul. So on your opponent's turn or on your next turn, you can call that trigger out again as a lock card to activate the effect again. So how do we go about playing Reverse Himiko? So first, let me talk about the setup. Since we mostly talk about premium on this channel and I personally do not play the V format, the best way to set up for this is to run draw triggers and critical triggers that can be shoved into the soul. We have a lot of this kind of triggers in the past, especially in Premium Collection and in the OG era. So you might want to include certain amount of those triggers while building the deck. Of course, the old way to go about this is just to soul charge a lot. But I do not really like that idea because Himiko Reverse herself doesn't soul blast that much. So unless you are playing the old Himiko, or you are playing something in the deck that requires a lot of soul, you might not want to play too many soul charges in the deck because it's better to not just have to worry about deck out. I know we have Dreaming Dragon to compensate for that, but it's just better to not have to worry about some things during the game. The final method is to play cards that can move the draw trigger or the critical trigger into the soul. So the cards that come to mind right now that does this are Valencia and Iwanagahime. The reason why you want to do this is mainly for draw triggers, because we do not have 10k trigger power draw triggers that move themselves to soul. So if you would run the old draw trigger that move himself to the soul, you'll only be getting 5k trigger power, and this is not good enough. We want that 10k, especially when we are using Himiko's skill defensively. Because of this, we might want to run cards like Iwanaga Hime or Valencia just to move that new 10k power draw trigger into the soul manually. With the setup out of the way, let us talk about how we can use Reverse Himiko. The one thing that really amazes me when I first saw this card is that you could use the trigger activation ability defensively. Meaning, if you have a draw trigger or crit trigger in your soul during your opponent's turn, and if Himiko was attacked, you could use that effect. Do not underestimate getting a free 10k trigger on your opponent's turn, because that can help us guard against certain decks. It can also mess up certain excel or protect decks power line. For this reason, you want to include some number of draw triggers in the deck, because if we resolve a draw trigger using this effect during our opponent's turn, we not only get the 10k power, but we get to draw an additional card that can help us with defense, or we can use that card on our next turn. This is also why I mentioned earlier that you might not want to run the old draw triggers with the 5k power increase instead of the new draw triggers with the 10k power increase. Of course, you could run the draw perfect guards, but maybe you want to run a little more draw triggers. I will now talk about using Himiko's effect on your own turn. So if you ride her and you use her on your own turn for the first time, you can only get the trigger effect off once, because you only lock one card, correct? But if you have done it during your opponent's turn and it passed back to your turn, your card that you lock on your opponent's turn is considered a lock card. So if you do her skill again on your turn, you have two lock cards, so the effect will trigger twice. Now this is really great because you can either use it to draw two cards or give two units one critical. So effectively you can have force 2 without actually going into force 2. And the best part is, this effect occurs during battle, so I believe you can activate her trigger effect during your turn. After you activate the trigger effect, you put Marduk's effect on standby first. Then after you activate her effect, you will strike into Marduk. So now you can give 2 of your units plus trigger, and they have to deal with a 3-drive track Marduk. And then finally, when your turn ends, the 2 triggers that you call out, one during your opponent's turn and one on this turn, they'll unlock. And at that moment, if you have another copy of Reverse Himiko in your hand, you can superior ride by putting all your rear guards, including that 2 triggers, into the soul. So now your 2 triggers are back into the soul and you are ready to repeat the entire process all over again. Now we are at the $1 million question that all of you students here today want to know. Do we need the old Himiko to play Himiko Reverse? And my answer is absolutely not. Of course, having the old Himiko is really good, because if you are on grade 2, I could just return a critical trigger and hit you really hard on my grade 3 turn and potentially rush you down and win on that turn. But do understand this, unless you already have it, old Himiko is really hard to find in the Japanese format right now. And based on my explanation earlier, all of new Himiko, all of Reverse Himiko's effect works with herself. So you do not need the old Himiko for Reverse Himiko to work. But of course, if you have her, it's good, it's great. I'm currently going to test a list without the old Himiko, and the list is pretty tight right now, so it's a bit difficult to fit in old Himiko into the deck. But if you want to tag in old Himiko into the deck for premium and it works for you, please let me know in our next lesson, or you could just let me know in the comments, it works too. So with Reverse Himiko out of the way, let us get on to the next card. I know for many of you, Minerva is the best Genesis waifu. But now let us talk about the next card. My favorite Genesis waifu, Sunlight Goddess Yatagarasu. What can I say? They really did her justice this time. This is her old version and this is her new version. A pretty good upgrade, I do say so myself. In terms of usage, I think Sunlight Goddess Yatagarasu is a very straightforward card. You just soul charge, play big beat sticks, and then whack face, restand, whack face again. Offense isn't just what she's good for. Yatagarasu has a defensive skill, and do note that if you call multiple guardians to the guardian circle at the same time, you can activate her skill separately that amount of times. So for example, if you call out 3 guardians to the guardian circle, you can soul blast up to 9 to proc her second skill 3 times. So this skill is very amazing because she helps the deck in the defense department, and it sort of fits with Genesis' theme too, because Genesis always has this type of hand trap effects such as Veratrum and shenanigans with Secret LC in a Fenrir deck. If you would like to know how to perform the Secret LC shenanigans, please raise up your hand or leave a comment down below, and I might do a short class detailing how to use that card in a Fenrir deck. Now I would like to talk about how to use Yatagarasu, and let us start with how do we build a Yatagarasu deck. This is a relatively simple deck to build. You only need 2 different things, and the first thing is that you need soul charges. The second thing is you need your payout cards, which are your beaters, because you'll be attacking with them 4 times in a single turn. Soul charges are pretty straightforward. They are cards that help you soul charge. Cards that come to mind are Hearty and Crude, and there's a new card, Apple Witch Cider. These cards are amazing in this deck because they help us soul charge. Now I know some of you might want to play soul charge reducers, but soul charge reducers do not really work with Yatagarasu because the total sum of the grades that you soul blasted should be 7 or above. You want at least 7, ideally 9, so that you can get the restand and draw. Another reason why you want to play more soul charges is because of Yatagarasu's second skill. Now do understand this, Yatagarasu's second skill only happens for 1 battle. It's not like Himiko or checking a defensive trigger, but having the extra guard can really help. So this is why you want to play soul charges and not soul charge reducers in the deck. The best beaters are Gleipnir, Iwagana Hime, and maybe Kazande. But I personally think that Gleipnir and Iwagana Hime are the best. When Gleipnir attacks, you can soul blast 1 to give him plus 10k, and that 10k lasts until the end of the turn. So during your first Gleipnir attack, he'll be hitting at 20k on his own. Then when you restand him with Yatagarasu's skill and use his skill again, he'll be a 40k. Kazande is pretty simple, you just soul blast a ton to make her super big and start attacking with her. And the last one that I want to talk about is Iwanaga Hime. She is probably the best beater in a Yatagarasu deck. After you activate Iwanaga Hime's skill, she is at least a 23k beater, and she can go up to being a 43k beater if you put a trigger into your soul. If you are feeling really spicy, you can run the Crit Sentinel and push her up to a whopping 73k unboosted. And this is before you add the bonus given by Yatagarasu. So definitely run the Iwanaga Himes in your Yatagarasu deck because she really hits for big numbers in both premium and in V. Some other beaters that you can consider are the Bastion support cards from Vanguard Overdrive. Most of them have effects when you stand them, but most of them are not really worth it. The best is Alden, but he's not as good as Gleipnir or Iwanaga Hime, and he's very expensive, and we're not using him for the reason why he's expensive in the Bastion deck. And the other one is a new angel that came out in set 4. that allows you to draw a card when you withstand him with a Vanguard's effect. You might want to run them in your gimmick Yatagarasu deck, but personally I think that they are not strong enough for a competitively tuned Yatagarasu deck. Another thing to mention is that when you build the Yatagarasu deck, you would want to have more grade 2s and grade 3s than grade 1s and grade 0s. The reason is very simple, because you want to have a total sum of grades that you Soul Blast to be 7 or more. Ideally you want it to be 9. So because of this, it is highly recommended if you play more grade 2s and or more grade 3s. You could actually run Valkyrion in your main deck, because Valkyrion is a grade 5, but beyond helping you hit those Soul Blast sums easier, Valkyrion really does nothing in the deck. If you run Valkyrion just for this and you accidentally draw into your Valkyrion, you might need to use Iwanaga Hime or cards like Solidar Banger or Saho Hime, basically cards that can move the Valkyrion from your hand into your soul. And of course Apple Witch Cider, which we'll talk about later, also does that. But personally, I don't think it's a good idea to run Valkyrion in the deck just for this purpose. Now that I've talked about what cards to play in a Yatagarasu deck, let me talk about how to play a Yatagarasu deck. Personally, I think it's pretty viable to play Yatagarasu as an aggressive Force 2 deck, that you go into Yatagarasu, you give one of your rear guards the Force 2 marker, probably a Iwanaga Hime, and then try to rush them down on their grade 2 turn. You can definitely go into Force 1 just to hit higher numbers, but since Gleipnir hits for 20k, Kazande at least hits for 20k, and Iwanaga Hime at least hits for 23k, you can actually safely go into a Force 2 and not worry about defensives and not worry about one Heal Guardian. If your opponent somehow has 2 Heal Guardians in their hand and they just give their Vanguard plus 20k, then it's gonna mess with your turn a bit, but that kind of situation basically mess with most decks anyway. As for playing the card itself, there's not much of a gimmick to it. You just call your Gleipnirs, call your Kazande, call your Iwanaga Hime and whack face. The second skill is interesting because it might look like a simple skill, but mastering when you want to activate it and when you do not want to activate it really matters, unless you are playing a lot of soul charges and you have a really big soul and you don't really care, which is probably what I'm going to do because I plan to run 3 to 4 Kraut's Croods in this deck. Since Yatagarasu Soul Blast on our turn and on our opponent's turn, a card that you might want to consider running to help with returning cards from the soul to the deck and to countercharge is Claimer Harry. Now Commander Jaime talked a lot about this card in his Veratrum video, so I'll put the links in the description. Please go and watch it up after the class. And yeah, that's all about Yatagarasu. This is actually quite lengthy because I have a lot of ideas for Yatagarasu and I'm really excited that my girl is back. So now let us go to the next card. But before that, let us pour out a drink of apple cider because we'll be talking about Apple Witch Cider. Quick side note, please do not drink alcohol in class because I do not need to talk with the headmaster about this. So was the drink of cider good? I hope you enjoy your drink of cider because we'll be talking about Apple Witch Cider. Lame jokes aside, personally I think among the 3 cards revealed for this set, Apple Witch Cider is probably the best because of how generic her skill is and how well her skill fits in with all the different playstyles of Genesis, except maybe Valkyrion, but let's be real, Valkyrion is not a Genesis deck. So as usual, let us take a look on how to use her. Apple Witch Cider is a soul charger like Hati, but I will argue that she is the best soul charger that Genesis has that isn't crude. This is because she is a repeatable Hati, but the timings are different. Hati gives you immediate soul charge, so you could use the Soul Blast on the main phase, but Apple Witch Cider requires you to boost with her first. So there is a timing difference to that. However, I don't think this is a really big deal breaker because Hati is one use only. You call him out, you soul charge, end of the story. Whereas for Apple Witch Cider, you could keep boosting with her and get the soul charge too. And in a certain point of the game where you feel that, oh, I do not need the soul anymore, but I need her back in my hand to guard defensively, you can just do the soul charge one and return her to the hand. So she has the versatility that way. And this is why I think that she's slightly better than Hati, unless you really need the soul charge during the main phase so you could soul blast during the main phase, or you do not want to attack with your side column first. Now, other than being a far superior Hati that gives you 2 soul charge every single turn, Apple Witch Cider can also be used defensively. If you choose to soul charge 1 soul instead of 2, you can return her to your hand. Now she's a great one, so returning to the hand means that you have a 10k shield in your hand to guard, but at the same time she has another skill, and this skill has relation with guarding. So you can put a card from your hand into your soul as a cost to make her a bigger shield. So you might be thinking, oh, she's a strictly worse perfect guard because you lose a card from your hand to make her slightly bigger, right? Except it's not really true, because you can put in cards into the soul. And we all know Genesis has a lot of cards that want to be in the soul or want to be soul blasted to give us effects. Apple Witch Cider can help us achieve that. Before we talk about what cards we want to put in the soul using Apple Witch Cider's effect, let me tell you this: certain Genesis decks can get up to really high soul count. Not Dark Irregulars level, but for example, a meme deck that I like to play, Melissa Fenrir, can easily get up to like 10 soul. Apple Witch Cider in those kind of decks can be a really big shield. And don't forget, in those decks you already want to have a big soul anyway, and Apple Witch Cider's first skill helps you achieve that, while her second skill serves as a little bonus to help you with the defense department, giving you the best of multiple worlds in terms of soul charging, getting your skills off more often, and guarding. So what cards do we want to push to the soul using Apple Witch Cider's effect? The first one that comes to my mind is Gelja. But right now, I still think Gelja is a good card in a Fenrir deck. You can consider running him, and you could use Apple Witch Cider's effect to move Gelja to the soul. And some other cards that come to mind are the old Valencia and the old Grappa. So these 2 cards are amazing in helping you refund your soul. Then you have cards like the old Melissa and Shamamal, which you want to be in the soul, so you can soul blast them out and superior call them. Then you have cards like the new Valencia, which have certain effects in your soul, and the new Shamamal, which also wants to be in the soul, so you can superior call her out with Valencia to do the Valencia combo. Now, if there is any students who do not understand how and what is the Valencia Shamamal combo, please raise up your hand or leave a comment down below, and I might do a short video about it. Now back to the topic. Now some other cards that you can use with this are the Regalia cards. For example, the old Norn and Hesperis. There are a lot of cards like this in Genesis, and I'm pretty sure if you go and look it up, there's even more. And these cards work very well with Apple Witch Cider's cost, which isn't a real cost, because if you build your deck right, you could turn that into a benefit. To summarize, Apple Witch Cider is an amazing card that has repeatable soul charge, and she bounces herself back into your hand so you can guard, and the more soul you have, the bigger the shield, which you probably should have the big soul because you have been soul charging for a few turns with Apple Witch Cider. And the cost of putting a card from your hand into the soul, not a real cost, because if you build your deck right and you play properly, it can become a benefit. That is all for today's class. If you have any questions or any comments or suggestions, please come and see me after the class and talk with me. Alternatively, you could like this video and leave a comment down below. And your feedback and suggestion is highly appreciated. Thank you for watching, stay safe and take care.